The council chamber on Unity Prime was enormous. Representatives from 46 different species sat in curved rows that stretched toward a domed ceiling. Ambassador stood at the central podium, her three eyes scanning the assembled delegates. She was from the Collective, a species that had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2,000 cycles. "The matter before us today concerns the humans," said. Her voice carried through the chamber's translation system. "They have been under probationary membership for 2 cycles now. Their progress has been acceptable." Several council members nodded. Others remained still. The humans were newcomers to galactic society, their planet Earth having made first contact only a decade earlier. They were eager, curious, and surprisingly adaptable. Most council members viewed them as harmless. On the human colony world of Horizon's Edge, the morning sun rose over fields of golden wheat. The colony was home to 50,000 people. They had built a life on this distant world far from Earth. Children played in parks. Farmers tended crops. Scientists studied the local ecosystem. It was peaceful. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the orbital defense platform above the colony. He was drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through the observation window. His shift was almost over. He planned to call his sister Lisa back on Earth later that day. "Captain, we have incoming signals," said Lieutenant Jack from the ground station. His voice came through the communication link. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're not responding to hails." Daniel set down his coffee cup. "How many ships?" 30 vessels. Configuration matches Dominion warships." Daniel's blood ran cold. They were a military empire, powerful and aggressive. They controlled a dozen systems and had a reputation for cruelty. "Sound the alarm. Get civilians to the shelters. Contact Earth immediately." Lisa Morgan was the communications officer on duty. Her fingers flew over the controls as she sent the distress signal toward Earth. It would take hours to reach home. Too long. The ships opened fire without warning. Energy beams struck the orbital platform. Shields flared and held, but barely. Daniel ran to his command station. His crew of 40 scrambled to their positions. "Return fire," Daniel ordered. "Target the lead ships." The platform's weapons activated. 3 defensive turrets sent plasma bolts toward the attacking fleet. They managed to damage 2 ships, but it was not enough. The enemy had overwhelming numbers. On the ground, Jack evacuated civilians into underground shelters. Families ran through the streets, parents carrying children. The colony's defense force numbered only 200 trained personnel. They were equipped for pirates or small raids, not a full military assault. The landing ships descended through the atmosphere. They were massive troop carriers, each holding hundreds of soldiers. Jack watched them come down and felt his stomach twist. This was not a raid. This was an invasion. "Get everyone inside," Jack shouted to his soldiers. "Seal the shelter doors. We'll hold them as long as we can." The troops emerged from their ships. They were 2 meters tall, covered in thick armor, and carried weapons that could punch through concrete. They moved through the colony in organized formations, methodical and efficient. Jack's forces engaged them at the colony's edge. Human rifles cracked. Weapons hummed. The battle was brief and brutal. Jack's soldiers fought hard, but they were outnumbered 15-1. Above, Daniel was losing his battle too. The orbital platform shuddered under repeated hits. Half his crew was dead or wounded. The shields were failing. He had one choice left. "Evacuate the station," Daniel said calmly. "Everyone to the escape pods. That's an order." "Captain, what about you?" Lisa asked. She was still at her station, still sending messages to Earth. "I'm staying. Someone needs to make sure these bastards pay." Daniel turned to look at her. "Lisa, when you get out, tell them what happened here. Tell Earth. Make them pay." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She and the remaining crew ran for the escape pods. Daniel sealed the command deck behind them. On the ground, they were not taking prisoners. They moved through the streets, targeting the shelters. Their weapons cut through the reinforced doors. Inside, families huddled together, terrified. The soldiers entered and opened fire. Jack died defending a shelter entrance, his body riddled with plasma burns. His last thought was of his daughter on Earth, hoping she would never know how he died. The massacre lasted for hours. The systematically executed civilians, men, women, children. They did not discriminate. When they were finished, 12,000 humans lay dead. Another 8,000 were rounded up and loaded onto the ships. They would be taken as slaves, a common practice in culture. Daniel Hayes watched it all from his command station. The platform's sensors showed him everything. He saw the shelters breached. He saw the bodies in the streets. He saw his people being herded onto enemy ships. "Earth," he said into the communication system, knowing no one could hear him yet. "This is Captain Daniel Hayes. Horizon's edge has fallen. 12,000 dead. 8,000 captured. The Dominion is responsible. Tell my sister I'm sorry I won't make that call." He activated the platform's main engines. The station began to move, slowly at first, then faster. He aimed it at the largest command ship. The enemy noticed too late. The orbital platform struck the vessel at full speed. The explosion was visible from the surface. Both ships disintegrated in a ball of fire. Daniel Hayes took 300 soldiers with him. The remaining ships left the system, their mission complete. Behind them, Horizon's edge burned. The news reached the Galactic Council within a day. Ambassador stood at the podium again, her expression carefully neutral. "The Council has received reports of an incident at the human colony Horizon's Edge. The Dominion claims the colony was harboring illegal weapons in violation of galactic treaties." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Council member Ox of the species raised his hand. "What is the human government's response?" "We are awaiting their official statement," said. "In the meantime, the Council recommends diplomatic channels to resolve this matter peacefully." On Earth, the distress signal finally arrived. It played in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters. Military personnel watched in silence as Lisa Morgan's voice came through, recording the attack in real time. They heard the weapons fire. They heard the screams. They heard Daniel Hayes' final message. Admiral Stephen Carter stood in the center of the command room. His face was like stone. Beside him, President Shaw watched the recording, her hands clenched into fists. When the recording ended, silence filled the room. No one spoke, no one moved. Finally, President Shaw turned to Admiral Carter. "How long until we can deploy the fleet?" 72 hours, Madam President." "Make it 48. Shaw's voice was cold and hard. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we're coming. Tell them that if they want peace, they should stay out of our way." Defense Secretary Martinez stepped forward. "The Council is already calling for restraint. They're asking us not to respond with force." Shaw looked at him. Her eyes were like ice. "We asked to join their council in peace. We followed their rules. We tried to be good neighbors, and they let this happen to our people. They'll learn what humans do when you hurt our families." Admiral Carter nodded. "I'll begin preparations immediately." "Stephen," Shaw said quietly, "when you find the ones responsible, show them no mercy. Show them what happens when they make humans angry. Show them why Earth is called a death world." Carter saluted. "Yes, Madam President, they're about to learn that lesson the hard way." Across Earth, the military mobilized. Ships were prepared. Weapons were loaded. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. The message was clear throughout the human fleet. 12,000 of their people were dead. 8,000 were slaves, and Earth was going to make someone pay for every single one of them. The Galactic Council sent diplomatic envoys to Earth, requesting calm and patience. They promised investigations and sanctions. They spoke of proportional responses and galactic law. President Shaw sent them all away with the same message. "You had your chance for justice. Now you'll see ours. Earth Expeditionary Fleet assembled in orbit above Earth. 40 warships hung in formation, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Admiral Stephen Carter stood on the bridge of the EDF Vengeance, the fleet's flagship. Around him, crew members worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Commander Grant. She was the fleet's fighter wing commander, a veteran pilot with ice in her veins. "We can jump on your order." Carter nodded. "Send the order. All ships prepare for hyperspace." The fleet vanished from Earth orbit in a flash of light. They entered hyperspace, traveling faster than the Galactic Council thought possible. Human scientists had been studying captured alien technology for years, improving it, perfecting it. The Council believed humans were decades behind galactic standard. They were wrong. On Unity Prime, Ambassador received word of the fleet's departure. She immediately called an emergency council session. "The humans have deployed a military fleet toward space. This is unacceptable. We must demand they stand down." "How large is their fleet?" asked another council member. 40 ships replied. Several council members laughed. The Dominion had over 100 warships. 40 human vessels seemed like suicide. "Perhaps they simply want to negotiate," suggested Ox. He was always hopeful for peaceful solutions. "We should send a message demanding restraint," said. "The humans must understand that disproportionate responses will not be tolerated." The council sent their message. Carter received it 3 hours later. He read it once, then deleted it without responding. His communication officer looked at him questioningly. "Admiral, should we send a reply?" "No," Carter said flatly. "They had their chance to talk, now we act." Chief Engineer Foster worked in the Vengeance's engineering section. He had spent the past 2 days making final adjustments to the ship's weapon systems. Human had been upgraded with new targeting computers and enhanced power systems. The plasma cannons could now fire twice as fast as before. "How are we looking?" Carter's voice came through the intercom. "All systems green, Admiral. We're ready to make them regret ever hearing the word Earth." In the fighter bays, Grant inspected her squadrons. 200 fighters were ready to launch. Their pilots were young, eager, and angry. They had all seen the recordings from Horizon's Edge. They all knew what they had done. "Remember your training," told them. "Stay in formation, watch and show these aliens why Earth breeds the best pilots in the galaxy." The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of space. Sensors immediately detected the enemy home fleet orbiting Prime, the military headquarters world. 80 warships, twice the human numbers. War Master and commanded the defense fleet from his flagship. He was a veteran of 50 battles, confident and cruel. When reports of the human fleet reached him, he laughed. 40 ships. The humans are fools, prepare to destroy them. We'll send their wreckage back to Earth as a warning." The fleet moved into attack formation. Their ships were larger than the human vessels, bristling with weapons. They had never lost a battle defending there. Admiral Carter stood calmly on the Vengeance's bridge. "Open a channel to the flagship." The channel opened, and his face appeared on the screen. He was massive, his face covered in scars from old battles. "I am War Master N. You will surrender your ships or be destroyed." Carter's expression did not change. "I am Admiral Stephen Carter of Earth. You attacked our colony. You killed our people. You took our citizens as slaves. I'm here to collect payment for that crime." And snarled, "Your colony violated galactic law. They paid the price. Now you will pay for your arrogance." "Last chance," Carter said. "Return our people. Surrender those responsible for the massacre. Do this and I'll limit the damage." And cut the channel. A moment later, the fleet opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. Carter watched them come. "All ships, activate defensive systems. Grant, launch fighters. Let's show them what Earth brought to this fight." The The human point defense systems came online. Hundreds of small tracked the incoming missiles. They fired in precise bursts. Every missile was intercepted and destroyed before reaching the human ships. Not a single one got through. The energy beam struck human shields. The shields held easily, barely flickering under the assault, and stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Impossible. Their defenses shouldn't be that strong. Fire again, all weapons. The second salvo was even larger. It met the same fate. The human point defense system was perfect, calculated by computers far more advanced than anything they possessed. "Our turn," Carter said. "All ships open fire." The human fleet unleashed hell, fired solid projectiles at incredible velocity. They punched through shields like they were paper. Holes appeared in enemy hulls. Ships began to drift, their engines destroyed. The plasma cannons added to the carnage. Bolts of energy struck vessels, melting armor and vaporizing internal systems. 3 ships exploded in the first minute of combat. Grant led her fighter wings into the battle. The small, agile craft danced between the larger ships. They targeted weapons and engines with precision strikes. Point defense tried to track them and failed. The human fighters moved too fast, their pilots too skilled. "Squadron 3, take out that cruiser's engines," ordered. "Squadron 5, cover them." The fighters swarmed a cruiser. Their weapons tore into the ship's rear section. The engines exploded. The cruiser tumbled out of formation, helpless, and watched his fleet die. In 30 minutes, he had lost 20 ships. The humans had not lost a single vessel. His tactical officer was shouting reports, but barely heard them. "How," he whispered, "how are they doing this?" The answer was simple. Humans had studied every galactic species' tactics for years. They had learned, adapted, and improved. Human technology was not borrowed from aliens. It was built on human ingenuity, human engineering, and human determination. And Earth had been hiding its true capabilities, waiting for the moment they would be needed. That moment had arrived. "Admiral, enemy flagship is trying to retreat," reported the Vengeance's tactical officer. "Don't let it," Carter said. "All ships focus fire on the flagship." Every human and plasma cannon turned toward and ship. The combined firepower was devastating. Shields collapsed. Hull plates shattered. The flagship's bridge exploded, killing and instantly. The remaining ships broke formation. Some tried to flee. Others fought on in desperation. It made no difference. The human fleet hunted them down methodically, destroying each one. 3 hours after it began, the battle was over. 80 warships had been reduced to debris. The human fleet had suffered minor damage to 4 ships. 23 human personnel were wounded. 0 were killed. Carter surveyed the wreckage on his tactical display. "Scan the planet. Locate the detention facilities where they're holding our people." Sensors swept across Prime. They found the prison compounds quickly. Located, Admiral, 6 facilities, approximately 6,800 human life signs. Carter's jaw tightened. They had lost another 1,200 people in captivity. "Prepare the Marines for planetary assault. Colonel Mitchell, you're up." The Marine landing ships launched from the fleet. Colonel Mitchell commanded 5,000 Marines, the best Earth had to offer. They descended through Prime's atmosphere in tight formation. The ground forces tried to resist. They failed. Human Marines moved through the prison compounds with ruthless efficiency. They used non-lethal weapons to subdue guards, then secured the prisoners. Sergeant Jennifer Brooks led the team that breached the largest compound. She found humans in cages, barely fed, many injured. Some were children. Jennifer's hand tightened on her weapon, but she kept her voice calm. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." A woman looked up at her with hollow eyes. "Are we really saved?" "You're saved," Jennifer said firmly. "And the people who did this will pay. I promise you that." The Marines recovered all surviving hostages. They also arrested the government officials and military commanders they could find. Many had fled, but enough remained. Carter established military occupation of Prime. Human forces controlled the capital city within hours. They were professional and disciplined, but there was no warmth in their actions. They had come for justice, and justice would be served. Captain Lisa Hayes, Daniel's sister, had volunteered for the legal team. She oversaw the War Crimes Tribunal. The captured leaders were tried under human military law. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, documents, eyewitness testimony. The trials lasted 3 days. Every defendant was found guilty. The sentences were carried out immediately. Human justice was swift and final. When news reached the Galactic Council, chaos erupted. Ambassador demanded immediate sanctions against Earth. The humans have violated every principle of proportional response. This aggression cannot stand. But other council members were quiet. Some even looked impressed. The humans had done in 3 hours what would have taken the council years of debate. President Shaw addressed the council via hologram. She stood in the Oval Office on Earth, her expression hard. "We came to your council in peace," Shaw said. "We asked only to be treated fairly. You allowed our colony to be attacked. You allowed our people to be slaughtered. You told us to be patient while our citizens died in cages." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We responded, this is justice, not revenge, not aggression, justice. And if any species on this council thinks they can harm humans without consequences, let them learn from the example. We are done being the galaxy's victims." The hologram ended. The council chamber sat in stunned silence. Commander Palmer was not a soldier. He was an intelligence officer, trained to find information that others wanted hidden. 3 days after the occupation of Prime began, he was working in what used to be the military command center. The building was massive, filled with computers and data storage systems. His team had seized everything before they could destroy it. Now they were going through it all, looking for anything useful. "Commander, you should see this," said technical specialist Amy Richardson. She was the best code breaker in the Earth Intelligence Service. If there was encrypted data, she could crack it. Walked over to her station. "What did you find?" Amy pulled up a file on her screen. "This is a communication log between the military command and someone on Unity Prime. It's dated 3 weeks before the attack on Horizon's Edge." Read the file, his blood ran cold. "This can't be right, run it again, make sure it's not corrupted." Amy checked the file 3 more times. Each time the result was the same. "It's genuine, Commander, the encryption keys match. The timestamps are consistent, this is real." Grabbed his communication device. "Get me Admiral Carter, right now." 10 minutes later, Carter stood in the command center, reading the same file. His face was expressionless, but his hands were clenched into fists. "Show me everything," he said quietly. Amy brought up more files. There were dozens of them. Communications between leaders and members of the Galactic Council, financial records showing money transfers, video recordings of council sessions, meeting minutes. The evidence painted a clear picture. The attack on Horizon's Edge was not just an action. It was sanctioned by the Galactic Council itself. "They voted on it," Amy said, her voice shaking. "The council held a secret session. They voted 34-12 to allow the attack to proceed. They called it a test. They wanted to see how humans would respond to aggression." Pulled up another file. "It gets worse. Some council members placed bets on the outcome. They gambled on how many humans would die." Carter stared at the screen. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he turned to copy everything. Every file, every communication, every piece of evidence. Triple encrypt it and send it directly to President Shaw. No one else sees this until she decides what to do with it. "What about the council?" asked. "They'll find out we have this information eventually." "Let them wonder," Carter said. Right now, they think we're just angry about They don't know we've discovered their involvement. That gives us an advantage. The encrypted files reached Earth 8 hours later. President Shaw sat in a secure conference room with her closest advisors. Defense Secretary Martinez, Secretary of State Karen Williams, and Intelligence Director Victor were all present. They watched the evidence in silence. When the last file finished playing, Shaw sat back in her chair. "They played us," she said. "From the beginning, they played us. They never intended to treat us as equals. We were just another species to test and manipulate." Karen Williams looked sick. "If we make this public, it will destroy the Council's credibility. Dozens of species will lose faith in the entire galactic government system." "Good," Shaw said flatly. "They should. The Council is corrupt to its core." Victor pulled up another set of files. "It's not just us. I had my people dig deeper into the archives. The Council has done this before. At least 6 other species were subjected to similar tests over the past 500 years. 3 of those species are no longer capable of space travel. The tests destroyed them." Martinez slammed his hand on the table. "We should mobilize every ship we have and go to Unity Prime. Show them what happens when you treat human lives like a game." "No," Shaw said. She held up her hand. "That's what they expect. They expect us to be angry and irrational. They expect us to lash out and prove we're too dangerous for civilized society." "Then what do we do?" Karen asked. Shaw was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We break them from the inside. We expose everything. We show every species in the galaxy what their council has been doing. We turn them against each other." Victor leaned forward. "A political operation instead of a military one." "Exactly, but we need allies first. We can't do this alone." Shaw turned to Karen. "Start reaching out to the council members who voted against the attack. There were 12 of them. Find out which ones can be trusted." Karen nodded. The species was the most vocal opponent. Ambassador Ox led the opposition to the vote. "Start with them," Shaw said. "Approach them quietly. Show them some of the evidence but not all of it. See if they're willing to work with us." While Earth's government planned their next move, Admiral Carter continued the occupation. Colonel Mitchell's Marines maintained order in the capital. They were not cruel, but they were not gentle either. The population learned quickly that human soldiers did not tolerate resistance. On Unity Prime, Ambassador called another council session. "The human occupation of Prime must end immediately. This is a violation of galactic sovereignty." But this time, some council members pushed back. Ox stood from his seat. "The humans lost 12,000 civilians in an unprovoked attack. They responded with military force. Perhaps the response was harsh, but can we truly claim it was unjustified?" "The humans destroyed an entire fleet," argued. "They occupied a council members. This sets a dangerous precedent." "They set the precedent when they massacred civilians," another council member said. "I find it difficult to sympathize with them." The council was dividing. Some members supported calls for action against Earth. Others were quietly pleased that someone had finally stood up to and a few were starting to worry about what else the humans might have discovered on Prime. Ambassador Helen Park was Earth's diplomatic envoy. She had been largely ignored by the Council since the attack on Horizon's Edge. Now she began having private meetings with selected Council members. Her first meeting was with Ox. They met in a secure location, away from Council headquarters. Ox was a species that valued peace and honesty above all else. "Ambassador Park," he said, "I am glad you reached out. I want you to know that many of us opposed the attack on your colony. We tried to stop it." Helen nodded. "We know, we've seen the voting records." Ox looked surprised. "You have access to the secret session records." "We have access to a lot of things," Helen said carefully. "That's actually why I wanted to meet. we've discovered information about the Council that troubles us deeply. Information we think you should see." She handed him a data tablet. It contained a small portion of the evidence, carefully selected, enough to show the Council's corruption, but not enough to reveal everything Earth knew. Ox read through the files. His face grew pale. "This is far worse than I imagined. The Council did not just allow the attack, they orchestrated it, they planned it." "Yes, and they've done it before to other species." Ox set down the tablet. "What will you do with this information?" "That depends," Helen said. "We can release it all publicly and watch the Council burn, or we can work with species like yours to reform the system from within, but we need allies we can trust." "You have my support," Ox said immediately. "The people will stand with Earth. What you've shown me here, this goes against everything we believe in. If the Council has truly become this corrupt, then it must be changed or replaced." Helen spent the next week meeting with other Council members. She approached representatives from the Commonwealth, the Federation, and several smaller species. Each one received the same carefully edited evidence. Each one reacted with shock and anger. A coalition began to form. Species that had been victims of Council manipulation or had voted against the attack. They met in secret, planning their next move. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Maria Santos led a team of human investigators on Prime. They were documenting everything for eventual war crimes prosecutions. Maria was a former lawyer who had joined the military specifically for this assignment. "We need to be thorough," she told her team. "Every piece of evidence needs to be cataloged, and when we bring charges against the Council members involved, there can be no doubt about their guilt." The evidence grew day by day. Communication logs, financial records, video files, testimony from officials trying to save themselves by cooperating, all of it pointing to the same conclusion. The Galactic Council had knowingly authorized the murder of 12,000 human civilians. In the Oval Office, President Shaw met with Dr. Moore, her chief advisor. Was a brilliant strategist who had helped Shaw win her election. "We're almost ready," Shaw said. "Helen has secured commitments from 11 Council species. That's not a majority, but it's enough to cause serious chaos." "What about the evidence release?" asked. "I want it to hit every species simultaneously. Not just the Council members, but their populations. Every citizen of every Council species needs to see what their leaders have done. That will require access to galactic communication networks. The Council controls most of them." Shaw smiled. "We have our own network. The Council doesn't know about it yet. We've been building it for the past 3 years, ever since we joined Galactic Society. Independent communication satellites in every major system." Looked impressed. "You've been planning for something like this." "I've been planning for the possibility that the Council couldn't be trusted," Shaw corrected. "Turns out I was right to be suspicious." On Prime, Admiral Carter received new orders from Earth. He read them twice, then called Colonel Mitchell to his office. "We're about to escalate this situation significantly," Carter said. "I need your Marines ready for anything. Some Council species are going to view what we're about to do as an act of war." "What are we doing, sir?" "We're telling the truth," Carter said. "Every ugly bit of it, and the Council is going to hate us for it." Back on Unity Prime, Ambassador was beginning to suspect something was wrong. Earth had been too quiet after their victory, too calm. She called a meeting with other Council members who shared her concerns. "The humans are planning something," she said. "They're too confident. They should be worried about sanctions and diplomatic isolation. Instead, they act like they have leverage over us." One of her allies, a representative from the Syndicate, nodded. "Perhaps they discovered something on Prime, something we would prefer remained hidden." Felt a chill. If they know about the vote, about the authorization, we could face serious consequences. Then we should move against them now, before they can use whatever they've found. But it was already too late. Earth's plan was in motion, and nothing the Council did could stop what was coming. President Shaw stood before the cameras. She was about to address not just Earth, but every inhabited world in known space. Behind her stood Admiral Carter, Ambassador Park, and the recovered survivors from Horizon's Edge. She had insisted they be present for this moment. The broadcast began at precisely midnight, Earth Standard Time. But midnight meant nothing in space. The message would reach billions of people simultaneously through Earth's hidden communication network. "My name is Shaw, President of Earth," she began. Her voice was calm and clear. "I speak today not just to humans, but to every citizen of every species in the Galactic Council. What I am about to tell you will change how you view your government forever." On Unity Prime, Ambassador was asleep when the broadcast began. Her assistant woke her urgently. "Ambassador, you need to see this. The human president is broadcasting across all channels. We can't shut it down." Rushed to her communication terminal, Shaw's face filled the screen. 3 months ago, the human colony of Horizon's Edge was attacked by the Dominion. 12,000 of our people were killed. 8,000 were taken as slaves. We were told this was an isolated incident. We were told they acted alone. Shaw paused. Behind her, the survivors stood silently, their faces showing the trauma they had endured. "We were lied to. The attack was not isolated. It was authorized by the Galactic Council itself." The broadcast switched to show documents, communication logs between council members and leadership, video recordings of the secret council session, financial records showing the betting pools. Across the galaxy, people watched in shock. On the Ox's people gathered in public squares to watch the broadcast. On the own citizens saw the evidence against their ambassador. Shaw continued. "The council voted 34-12 to allow the attack. They called it a test. They wanted to see how humans would respond to aggression. They gambled with our lives. They bet on how many of us would die." The broadcast showed more evidence. Names of council members who voted for the attack, names of those who placed bets, exact amounts of money transferred. "This was not the first time," Shaw said. "We have discovered records of similar tests conducted on 6 other species over the past 5 centuries. 3 of those species were destroyed. Their civilizations collapsed because the Council decided they were expendable. On dozens of worlds, riots began. Citizens who had trusted their Council representatives now felt betrayed. They poured into the streets, demanding answers." Shaw's expression hardened. "The Galactic Council has been corrupt for centuries. They claim to represent peace and justice, but they authorize murder. They claim to protect all species, but they sacrifice the weak to test the strong. This cannot continue." She gestured to the people behind her. "These are the survivors of Horizon's Edge. They lived in cages. They watched their families die. And their leaders, the council you elected, allowed it to happen, planned for it to happen, profited from it." The broadcast switched to show Ambassador Helen Park. She stood with representatives from 11 other species. Oxavtha was among them. "We are not alone in our outrage," Shaw said. 12 council species voted against the attack on Horizon's Edge. Many more have been victims of council manipulation. Today, we announce the formation of a new alliance, the Alliance for Transparent Governance. We will no longer accept the council's corruption. We will build something better. Helen Park stepped forward. "The alliance is open to any species that values honesty, equality, and justice. We will share technology. We will defend each other. And we will never allow secret votes to determine who lives and who dies." The broadcast showed footage of the battle at Prime, the destruction of the fleet, the rescue of human hostages, the trials of leaders. "Some will say our response was too harsh," Shaw said. "They will claim we should have used diplomatic channels, but diplomatic channels require honest partners. The Council proved they are not honest. They had years to act against the They chose to authorize an attack instead. She leaned toward the camera. To every citizen watching this, I ask you to demand accountability from your leaders. Ask them if they knew about the vote. Ask them if they participated in the betting pools. Ask them how many other species have been sacrificed for their tests. And if they refuse to answer, ask yourselves what kind of leaders they truly are. The broadcast ended. Silence followed for a moment. Then chaos erupted across the galaxy. Thousands of people surrounded the government buildings. They demanded its resignation. They demanded investigations into what their leaders knew. Security forces tried to maintain order, but the crowds were too large. Similar scenes played out on a dozen other worlds. Species whose representatives had voted for the attack faced immediate backlash from their own people. Some governments tried to deny the evidence. Others admitted guilt and begged forgiveness. On Unity Prime, the council chamber was in chaos. Council members shouted at each other. Some demanded Shaw be arrested for spreading lies. Others demanded investigations into the claims. Tried to call for order, but no one listened. Her communication terminal was flooded with messages from her. Her government was collapsing. Her people wanted her head. Ox stood calmly amid the chaos. He had known this was coming. He had prepared for it. "The evidence is overwhelming," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We can deny it all we want, but the truth is clear. This council authorized mass murder. We must face that truth." "The humans faked the evidence," insisted. "They want to destroy the council." "Then let them prove it's fake," Ox said. "Open your files. Allow independent investigators to examine the records. If the humans lied, it will be obvious." But said nothing. She could not allow investigators to access the files because the evidence was real. Everyone in the chamber knew it. Within days, 3 species formally from the Galactic Council. The collective was the first. Government had been overthrown by her own people. The new leadership publicly apologized to humanity and announced their intention to join the alliance. 5 more species followed within the week. The council was bleeding members. Those who remained were the most autocratic, the most resistant to change. They formed their own group, calling themselves the Confederation of Sovereign Systems. The galaxy was splitting in two. On Earth, President Shaw met with her military commanders. Admiral Carter had returned from Prime, leaving Colonel Mitchell in charge of the occupation. "The Confederation is making threats," Shaw said. "They're calling us warmongers. They're saying we want to conquer the galaxy." "Do we?" asked General. He was the head of Earth's army, a gruff man who preferred direct action. "No," Shaw said firmly. "We want justice and transparency. If we have to fight for it, we will. But conquest is not our goal." Admiral Grant, newly promoted from commander, spoke up. "The Confederation is building up their military. Intelligence shows they're pooling resources. They're preparing for war." "Let them prepare," Shaw said. "Meanwhile, we'll strengthen the alliance. We'll share our technology with member species. We'll build a defense network they can't break." Intelligence Director Victor pulled up a star map. "The Confederation controls about 30% of known space. The Alliance controls about 40%. The remaining 30% is neutral or independent systems." "Those neutral systems are the key," Shaw said. "We need to show them that the Alliance is the better choice. Not through threats, but through actions. We help them. We trade with them. We prove that we're building something worth joining." Dr. Moore nodded. "A hearts and minds campaign on a galactic scale." "Exactly," Shaw said. "The Council ruled through fear and manipulation. We'll lead through example and cooperation." Meanwhile, the Alliance was rapidly expanding. Species that had been marginalized by the old Council flocked to the new organization. Within 2 months, the Alliance had 42 member species. Earth took a central role, but not as a ruler. Human military technology was shared freely with all Alliance members. Admiral Carter became Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces, but his command council included representatives from a dozen species. Admiral Grant commanded the Alliance Rapid Response Fleet. It was a multinational force, with ships from 15 different species. They trained together, learned from each other, and formed bonds that crossed species lines. On Prime, Colonel Mitchell watched the political situation develop with interest. His Marines were still occupying the planet, but the situation was changing. Many citizens were starting to see humans not as conquerors but as liberators. The old government had been brutal to its own people as well as to others. With that government gone, ordinary were discovering freedoms they had never known. Mitchell's Marines helped rebuild infrastructure. They ensured fair distribution of resources. They protected civilians from the remaining loyalist forces. Sergeant Jennifer Brooks worked with children who had been orphaned by the conflict. She had expected to hate all, but these children were innocent. They had not chosen their government's crimes. "Will you kill us?" one child asked her in broken English. "No," Jennifer said gently. "We're here to help you. Your old leaders did terrible things, but that doesn't mean you should suffer for it." The occupation was teaching both species something important. Humans could be harsh to their enemies, but they were not cruel to innocents, and freed from their tyrannical government, were capable of change. Back on Unity Prime, the remaining council members held their final session. Only 12 species attended. The rest had left or been overthrown by their own people. "This is a dark day," said one of the remaining members. "The council that has governed for 3,000 years is dead." "No," said another. "It's not dead, it's transformed. We are the Confederation now, we still have power, we still have resources, and we will survive." They elected new leadership. They made plans to oppose the Alliance. They swore revenge against Earth for destroying what they had built. But deep down, they all knew the truth. The old order was gone, the galaxy had changed, and there was no going back to the way things were. On Earth, in the memorial garden built for Horizon's Edge victims, President Shaw stood with Admiral Carter and the survivors. A new monument had been erected, listing the names of all 13,200 who died. "They didn't die for nothing," Shaw said quietly. "They died and the galaxy woke up. They died and we built something better from the ashes." Carter nodded. "The question is whether we can maintain it. The Confederation will strike back eventually." "Let them try," Shaw said. "We're not alone anymore. We have allies, we have friends, and we've shown the galaxy that bullies can be beaten." She looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Confederation was plotting, but also out there, 42 species were working together, building a better future. The war had just begun, but humanity had already won something important. They had won the right to be heard. They had won respect. And they had won allies who would stand with them against whatever came next. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council collapsed. The galaxy looked very different now. The Alliance for Transparent Governance had grown to 42 member species, representing nearly half of all spacefaring civilizations. The Confederation of Sovereign Systems held firm with 12 species, controlling important military and trade routes. President Shaw stood in the new Alliance headquarters on Unity Prime. The old council chamber had been renovated, its intimidating curved seats replaced with a circular arrangement where all species sat as equals. She was here for the first official Alliance assembly. "This is a historic day," said Ambassador Helen Park, who had been elected as Earth's permanent representative. "For the first time in galactic history, we have a government based on transparency and equality." The assembly chamber filled with representatives from all 42 member species. Oxavtha was there. So were delegates from the Commonwealth, the Federation, and dozens of others. They came in all shapes and sizes, but they shared one thing in common. They believed the old way was wrong. The first order of business was establishing the Alliance Bill of Rights. Every species had contributed to the document. It guaranteed freedom from secret trials, protection against government-sanctioned violence, and the right to know what their leaders were doing. "No more secret votes," Ox said as he presented the document. "No more hidden agendas. Everything the Alliance does will be public record, available to any citizen of any member species." The bill passed unanimously. It was a simple vote, but it represented a fundamental shift in how galactic government worked. The second order of business was defense. The Confederation had been making threats for months. Intelligence reports suggested they were building up military forces, preparing for eventual conflict. Admiral Stephen Carter addressed the Assembly via hologram from Alliance Defense Command. "The Confederation has 80 warships at last count. They're recruiting soldiers and stockpiling weapons. We need to be ready." "What do you recommend?" asked a representative. "We need a coordinated defense network," Carter said. "Every member species contributes ships and personnel according to their capabilities. We train together, fight together, and protect each other. No one stands alone." The proposal passed with strong support. Within weeks, Alliance ships from a dozen species were conducting joint exercises. Human instructors taught alien crews how to use the advanced weapons systems Earth had developed. In return, aliens taught humans about technologies they had perfected over centuries. Admiral Grant commanded the first truly integrated Alliance fleet. Her flagship had a human captain, a tactical officer, a communications specialist, and crew from 8 other species. They learned to work together, bridging language and cultural barriers. "We're stronger together," told her crew during their first mission briefing. "Each species brings something unique. Humans have strong defensive technology, have excellent sensors, have fast engines. Together, we're better than any of us alone." On Prime, Colonel Mitchell oversaw the transition to democratic government. The occupation was ending. The people were ready to govern themselves again, but under a very different system. Elections were held. They chose new leaders, peaceful reformers who rejected the old military dictatorship. The new government formally apologized to humanity and requested Alliance membership. "Are you sure about this?" President Shaw asked her advisors. "They killed 12,000 of our people. Can we really accept them into the Alliance?" Secretary of State Karen Williams spoke carefully. "The old government did those things. These new leaders are different. They've held trials for war criminals. They've made reparations. They're trying to change." Shaw was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "If we want the Alliance to be about forgiveness and second chances, we need to practice what we preach. But they need to understand that trust is earned, not given." They were accepted as provisional members of the Alliance, with full membership pending after a probationary period. It was a controversial decision, but Shaw believed it was right. The Alliance could not be about revenge. It had to be about building something better. Sergeant Jennifer Brooks was reassigned to the Alliance peacekeeping forces. Her experience working with civilians made her valuable in cross-cultural situations. She trained soldiers from multiple species how to work with local populations during stability operations. "The goal is not to conquer," she taught her students. "The goal is to protect. Sometimes that means fighting, but more often it means helping people rebuild their lives." Meanwhile, the Confederation was not sitting idle. They had consolidated their power and were reaching out to neutral systems, trying to expand their influence. Their message was simple: the Alliance wants to control you, we offer independence. Some neutral systems believed them. Others saw through the propaganda. The galaxy was choosing sides, and not everyone chose the Alliance. Intelligence Director Victor monitored the Confederation's activities closely. "They're planning something big," he told President Shaw during a secure briefing. "Too many resources moving to their border regions. Too many war games and military exercises." Do you think they'll attack? Shaw asked. Eventually, yes. They see the alliance as an existential threat. They can't allow a government based on transparency to succeed because it exposes everything wrong with their own systems. How long do we have? Months, maybe a year. They're building up strength, waiting for the right moment. Shaw nodded grimly. Then we use that time to make the alliance stronger. Every day we have is a day to prepare, to build alliances, to show neutral systems that we're the better choice. Earth continued to share its technology with alliance members. Medical advances that could cure diseases were distributed freely. Energy generation systems were installed on resource-poor worlds. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions were taught to species facing food shortages. "Why are you giving all this away?" asked a delegate from a recently joined species. "This technology is valuable. You could demand payment." Ambassador Park smiled. "We could, but that's what the old council would have done. We believe that helping each other makes everyone stronger. When your people are healthy and fed, you're better partners and allies." It was a radical philosophy in galactic terms. For centuries, technology had been hoarded, trade had been controlled, and weak species had been exploited. The Alliance was trying something different. And it was working. Public opinion across the galaxy shifted. Even in neutral systems that had not joined the Alliance, ordinary citizens saw the difference. They saw Alliance members prospering while Confederation members struggled under authoritarian governments. 3 more species left the Confederation and requested Alliance membership. The Confederation tried to stop them, even threatening military action, but the Alliance protected the defectors. Admiral Carter deployed rapid response fleets to ensure the transitions happened peacefully. The Confederation grew more desperate. They needed a victory to prove their strength and stop the bleeding of members. They began planning an attack that would shock the galaxy and destroy the Alliance's credibility. Their target was a remote Alliance outpost on the edge of explored space. It was lightly defended, with only a small garrison. The Confederation thought it would be an easy victory. They were wrong. The attack came without warning, just like the attack on Horizon's Edge had. 20 Confederation warships dropped out of hyperspace near the outpost. But this time, the defenders were ready. The Alliance early warning system, designed by human engineers and scientists, detected the ships immediately. Admiral Grant's rapid response fleet was deployed within minutes. They reached the outpost before the Confederation ships could land troops. The battle was short. The Confederation had numerical superiority, but the Alliance had better technology and coordination. Human weapons combined with sensors and speed made the Alliance fleet deadly effective. The Confederation lost 8 ships and retreated. The outpost was saved with minimal casualties. It was the Alliance's first major military victory, and it sent a clear message. The new government could defend itself. The Confederation leadership met in emergency session. Their surprise attack had failed. Their credibility was damaged, and more of their member species were questioning whether staying in the Confederation was wise. "We underestimated them," admitted one of the Confederation leaders. "We thought the Alliance was weak because they value cooperation. We were wrong. They're strong because they cooperate." "What do we do now?" asked another. "We have 2 choices. Continue this path toward inevitable war and likely defeat, or we negotiate, admit our mistakes, and try to find a way to coexist with the Alliance." It was a bitter pill to swallow, but reality was clear. The Alliance was not going away. They were growing stronger every day, and the Confederation could not win a prolonged conflict against an enemy with superior technology and twice as many members. Slowly, carefully, the Confederation reached out through back channels. They requested negotiations. They did not apologize for their actions, not yet, but they acknowledged that the galaxy had changed. President Shaw received the request in her office on Earth. She consulted with her advisors, with Admiral Carter, with Ambassador Park, and with leaders from other Alliance species. "Should we negotiate?" Shaw asked. "We should listen," Ox advised via hologram. "But we should not compromise our principles. The Alliance exists because we refuse to accept corruption and secret violence. If the Confederation wants peace, they must embrace those same principles." Shaw agreed. She sent a response to the Confederation. The Alliance would negotiate, but only if the talks were public. Only if every citizen of every species could watch and hear what was being discussed. No more secret deals. The Confederation reluctantly agreed. The negotiations began on a neutral world, broadcast across the galaxy. It was slow, difficult work. The Confederation wanted to maintain their power and autonomy. The Alliance demanded accountability and transparency. The talks continued for months. Progress was slow, but it was progress. Both sides began to realize that endless conflict served neither of them. The galaxy was big enough for different systems of government, as long as they could coexist peacefully. On Horizon's edge, now fully rebuilt, a ceremony was held. The memorial to the 13,200 dead was rededicated. President Shaw attended, along with survivors and families of the victims. Representatives from all Alliance species came to pay their respects. Admiral Lisa Hayes commanded the defense platform now. She looked down at the colony where her brother Daniel had died defending civilians. She thought about how much had changed since that terrible day. "He would be proud," Shaw said, standing beside Lisa at the memorial. "Your brother's sacrifice was not in vain. He helped start a revolution that changed the galaxy." Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes. "I just wish he could see it. Wish he could see what we built from the ashes of that day." "He sees it," Shaw said. "Everyone who died here sees it. They're watching us from wherever the dead go, and they're proud of what their sacrifice achieved." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Thousands of people, human and alien, stood together in quiet remembrance. Then a child, a young girl who had been orphaned by the war, placed flowers at the memorial base. It was a powerful symbol. The species that had killed humans and the humans they had harmed, coming together in peace. It represented everything the Alliance hoped to achieve. Back on Earth in her office late at night, President Shaw looked out at the stars. Dr. Moore sat with her, going over the latest reports. 3 more neutral systems requested Alliance membership today, said. "The economic benefits alone are attracting attention. Our free trade agreements and technology sharing are proving popular." "Good," Shaw said, "but we can't get complacent. The Confederation is still dangerous. Even if we reach a peace agreement, tensions will remain for years." "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked. "Not just the military response, but everything after, destroying the old council, building the Alliance, sharing all our technology." Shaw was quiet for a moment. "I think we did the only thing we could do. When you see corruption, you have 2 choices. Accept it or fight it. We fought. And yes, I think we did right." She turned from the window. Earth came to the galaxy looking for friends, for partners, for a place in the larger community. Instead, we found a system built on manipulation and secret violence. We could have walked away, isolated ourselves, but that would have meant abandoning every other species trapped in that system. "So we became protectors instead of partners," said. "We became both," Shaw corrected. "We protect those who need protection. We partner with those who share our values, and we show the galaxy that there's a better way to live together." Admiral Carter visited Earth for the first time in months. He met with Shaw to discuss the long-term future of Alliance defense forces. "The military is in good shape," he reported. "We have 60 Alliance warships now, crews from 20 different species working together. If the Confederation attacks again, we'll be ready." "And if they don't?" Shaw asked. If the negotiations succeed and we achieve lasting peace, what then? Carter smiled. Then we use our fleets for exploration instead of war. There's a whole galaxy out there we've barely seen. Species to meet, worlds to discover, knowledge to gain. That's what the military should be for, protecting exploration and discovery, not conquest. You've changed, Shaw observed. When this started, you wanted revenge. Now you're talking about exploration. I got my revenge, Carter said quietly. The people responsible for Horizon's Edge are dead or imprisoned. The system that allowed it to happen is destroyed. Now it's time to build instead of destroy. On Unity Prime, Ambassador Helen Park worked late in her office. She was preparing for the next day's Alliance Assembly session. Her assistant, a young named brought her the latest reports. Ambassador, you should go home and rest, said. You've been working for 16 hours straight. Helen smiled. Just a bit longer, there's always one more thing to do. The Alliance won't fall apart if you sleep, said gently. You taught me that no one person is essential. That's what makes the Alliance strong. Helen set down her data pad. You're right, and you're a good assistant. You'll make an excellent ambassador yourself someday. She left the office and walked through the Alliance headquarters. It was late, but the building was still active. Representatives from dozens of species worked on various projects. Some were writing trade agreements. Others were planning scientific exchanges. A few were simply having coffee and conversation, building the personal relationships that made the Alliance work. This was what they had built, not just a government but a community. Species that had been strangers were becoming friends, and at the center of it all was a simple principle: treat others with honesty and respect. On Earth, in the Memorial Garden, a new inscription was added to the monument. It read, "They died alone. We will never be alone again." President Shaw read the inscription during her next visit. It captured everything perfectly. Horizon's Edge had been attacked because humanity was isolated and weak. Now humanity was surrounded by allies and strong. The galaxy would never be perfect. Conflicts would continue. Some species would resist change. The Confederation might never fully embrace Alliance principles, but the direction was clear. The old order of secret manipulation was broken. The new order of transparent cooperation was rising. And Earth, the species that had been tested and found strong, was at the heart of it all. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as partners, protectors, and friends to any species willing to stand for justice. President Shaw looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, the next challenge was waiting. The next crisis, the next enemy, the next test of the Alliance's resolve. But whatever came, humanity would face it with allies at their side. They had learned the most important lesson of all. Alone, they could be hurt. Together with friends who shared their values, they were unstoppable. The Galactic Council had been stunned by Earth's brutal retribution against but they were terrified by what came after. Not more violence, not conquest, but something far more dangerous to tyrants everywhere. A vision of a galaxy where the strong protected the weak, where governments served their people instead of exploiting them, where truth mattered more than power. That vision was spreading, world by world, species by species, and nothing the old order could do would stop it. Humanity had not just won a war. They had won hearts and minds across the stars. They had shown the galaxy what was possible when people worked together for something better than themselves. And that, in the end, was the most terrifying weapon of all.